Welcome to the first shiur by Rabbi Shammai Siskind on Zoom with Machon Shilo. Rabbi Siskind is a member of the Beit Hawad of Machon Shilo, led by Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Rabbi Bar-Hayim will be introducing Rabbi Siskind. Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom uvracha. Welcome to all. Rabbi Shammai Siskind is, Baruch Hashem, a young but very serious Talmid Chachamim and an academic. And it is with great pleasure that I look forward to this shiur, which is the first that Rabbi Shammai will be giving. I hope the first of many. I do not think that I need to elaborate at this point. I think Rabbi Shammai will be able to speak for himself, and people will very quickly grasp the importance of what he has to say. So please, Rabbi Shammai, bevakasha.
Thank you very much, Kvod Harav. First of all, a sincere word of thanks to the tzibur for being patient while we worked through the various difficulties over here. It's not a surprise that there's some type of miniyah. It reminds me of the video that the Rav shared from Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal in his comments that if there weren't catastrophic problems, then it would be a sign that it wasn't from God. So if the fact that there are some challenges is always a good indication. But Be'ezrat Hashem, this will be a one-time challenge, and next time it will be a bit more streamlined. So let's just jump right in. The topic that I wanted to discuss this evening. Thank God we've merited to experience a rejuvenation of Nusach Eretz Yisrael in our time. Recently, the Machon, together with the Rav, we reinstituted Nusach Eretz Yisrael on Har HaBayit, the Beit Tfilah, the house of prayer for not just the Jewish people, but for the whole world, which was, as Binyamin said, really an historic event. And I wanted to examine some of these things because, as we often discuss in these meetings, the idea of the nusach, right? It's not critical from a strictly halachic point of view. A person is able to pray in the nusach that he prefers. If a person feels a certain attachment to a certain nusach, if he feels that it resonates with him, sometimes we think we all feel intuitively that Nusach Eretz Yisrael has a certain meaning, not just for its historical significance, the fact that all the Chachamim that lived in Eretz Yisrael from the time of the Mishnah, from the time of the Talmud, they all prayed some version of what we call Nusach Eretz Yisrael, not just from a historic version, but also that there's something unique about Nusach Eretz Yisrael, like inherently. And I wanted to take the opportunity to delve into that, to highlight what we can see, some clear differences between the Nusach of Eretz Yisrael and the Nuschaot that branched off from the Bavli version, from the Babylonian version, that more or less characterizes the Amidah that is prayed by the majority of Klal Yisrael today. By the way, can you make myself visible? Yes, is my camera functioning? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll jump right in. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. So Binyamin is going to be the operator of the Makorot over here. I have the Makorot open up in front of me. That was the technical problem, by the way. They were having some difficulty with my screen sharing without making things spontaneously combust on my end. So thank God we found the solution. So Binyamin is gonna run the Makorot. I'll just tell you when to like move on to the next link and you'll open it. Yeah. Okay. Great. So we'll start from the We're going to start from a section of the Talmud Yerushalmi and Masechet Brachot. This is before we even delve into the specific brachot of the Amidah, just to appreciate how Chazal, or perhaps more accurately, the Chachamim of Eretz Yisrael, understood the mivneh of the Amidah. Right? It's important how the very thing is structured and what the significance of that structure is. So we have in the Talmud Yerushalmi, this is in the fourth parak in Halacha Gimel, Zamar Rabbi Simon, Kineged Shmona Esrei Chuyot Shebashidra, Sh'adam Omeid U'mitpalel Tzarich Lasuach B'chulam. That why did Chazal enact this structure of the Amidah, that there are 18 blessings? It's Kineged the 18 vertebrae of the spine, right? That a person is required to bow during the brachot of the Amidah, and to bend the vertebrae of the spine, as Chazal define, right? The bowing as alshi pakaku kol chuyotav shebashidra, until all the vertebrae have been flexed, so to speak, right? If you ask a doctor today, they'll tell you, well, there aren't 18 vertebrae, there are really 24, because they consider the vertebrae of the neck part of the spine. But in fact, if you just look at the back part of the spine, there are in fact 18 vertebrae, right? Like that is in fact the number of vertebrae that you have. Okay, Ma'atam, what is the reason why Chazal focused on this aspect of the spine and the 18 vertebrae, etc.? So Kol atzmotai tamarna Hashem michamocha, as David HaMelech says, that all of my bones will cry out in prayer. Now moving on, Amar Rabbi Levi, so he has a slightly different opinion. Keneged Shmona Esrei Hazkarot Shakatuv B'Havu LaHashem B'nei Elim. It is Keneged the 18 times that Shem Hashem is mentioned in this parak of Tehillim. And moving on, a similar sentiment from Rabbi Chuna. We're moving on to a slightly separate conversation, and this is important to highlight. Again, we're trying to understand how the Chachamim of Eretz Yisrael viewed the mivneh, the structure of the Amidah. Okay, so until now you could say, okay, so thematically the Chachamim are trying to connect the number of brachot to certain things, to certain ideas that we find, in the Tanakh. Perhaps even broader themes about the structure of the human being. Okay, so because there are 18 things over here, so we want to have 18 brachot paralleling these 18 other things. Okay, so Rabbi Chuna says, Im yom adam, if someone will tell you, Harei shvais reinun, there are really 18 names of God in this parak of Tehillim, Emorlo shel minim kvar kavu chachamim b'yavne, right? Really, there are 18 blessings in the Amidah, because the Chachamim had already enacted an additional blessing of the minim in Yavne, and that filled the cheshbon, so to speak, that filled the calculus of 18 blessings to make sure that there are in fact 18 blessings in the Shmona Esrei. V'shel zkenim v'shel gerim b'miftach l'tzadikim v'shel David b'bonei Yerushalayim. Okay, now just pay attention to what this is saying. The idea, the theme of the Zakenim, of the elders, and the Gerim, of praying for the righteous converts, okay, was included in Tzadikim, and Bonei Yerushalayim and David were included in one blessing as well, right? To make sure that this calculus remains the same, that the calculus. So what we're seeing here is that Chazal had an understanding that there is a necessity. There's these different themes that we need to cover, okay, throughout the tefillah. But what's also important is that it maintains this equilibrium of 18. So I want to share with you a very interesting makor that we find in Machshava of the past 300 years. Okay, the Baal Yefei Toar. Binyamin. Yeah, there you go. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, was a very important chacham in Turkey about 300 years ago, and he wrote this magnum opus commentary on the Bereshit Rabbah called Yefei Toar. In the current versions of the edition of the Midrash Rabbah, so they have a condensed version of the Yefei Tohar in like notes on the bottom, but really the full Perush itself, excuse me, that's the wrong document. Yeah, this one, correct. So the full Perush is a very, very long, lengthy analysis in philosophy and in mysticism, but the small notes that they have in the standard editions is what appears today. So the Baal Yefei Torah asks a very interesting question, right? He's actually he's commenting on the Bereshit Rabbah in Parsha Samechet, but also discusses all these different numbers of 18 for which Chazal wanted to enact a certain structure to the Shemona Esrei. So he says like this: why is it necessary to give a reason for the number of blessings? The number of things is just a consequence of the subjects that you want to touch on, right? If someone's going to say, I'm giving a speech now, and we're going to touch on 10 topics. So someone in the audience stands up and says, why are you talking about 10? Why couldn't you have talked about 11? So the answer to that is because I thought of all the topics necessary to talk about now, and it happens to come out to the number 10. It's not like I decided right from the beginning that I wanted to only talk about 10 things. No, these were the topics that I determined are important. So, and that number comes out to 10. But it's not like I'm trying to fit in the topics into the number, right? No, I decided the topics that are important, and the number that it is, that's the number, right? So it seems like a logical question. Because Chazal saw a need for these particular subjects in these particular blessings, tiknum, that's why they instituted them. Okay, which seems to be a very good question, right? Just a logical question. Yeah. Now, the Yefei Torah is to highlight the logic of the question. You would think that why are Chazal even bothering coming to give a reason for why there's 18 blessings? You don't need a reason for that. Rather, the answer is simple. Like the answer is muvan me'elav. Chazal saw that there are certain topics that are necessary to talk about in Shemona Esrei, and that number comes out to 18. That seems to be just the logical understanding, right? What we see here, Rabotai, what we see here is that ha-gufa, as we say, right? Chazal asked this question, and again, this is from the Yerushalmi, but this appears, as we just saw in Bereshit Rabbah, also in the Midrash Tanchuma and Parshat Vayera. Chazal have this discussion why there are specifically 18 blessings. In different sources, it gives different understandings. Also a makor in Midrash Tanchuma, by the way, that there are 18 times in the Torah where the names of the Avot appear all together. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov appear all together 18 times in the Torah. That's just another reason that it gives. But be that as it may, the point is that many times Chazal are asking this question, what is the significance of 18? From the very fact that Chazal are asking this question, we see that there is a significance to 18. There is, in fact, a significance to 18, and Chazal wanted to maintain this structure of 18 blessings and not to deviate from that. That's the from the 18, and that's the proper understanding of this Yerushalmi over here, right? When Chazal were metaken the bracha of the minim later on in history, in the time of Rabban Gamliel, right? When they were metaken that, they shifted around the topics in Shemona Esrei. They included gerim in tzadikim, which, by the way, implies that at one point there could have been a bracha of gerim separate to tzadikim, right? They included gerim in tzadikim, and they included David in Bonei Yerushalayim. They shifted around the topics. So it's not like the assumption of the Yefei Torah that says, well, the number is just a consequence of the topics that I want to talk about. No, it doesn't work that way. Really, Chazal were insistent that there should remain a structure to the Amidah, which is 18 blessings. And depending on the situation that you happen to be in, if Rabban Gamliel, for instance, wakes up one morning and says, listen, we have to make a blessing for these minim, for these mishumadim, we have to make a blessing for them. Okay, fine, it's necessary to make a separate blessing. But if we want to do that, then we have current topics in order to fit them in to the blessing structure. And this is very clear from the Yerushalmi. There's an insistence on maintaining the point that I wanted to highlight. That it's clear from the Yerushalmi that this structure of 18 is an inyan in and of itself. And all of these themes that Chazal talk about, whether it be the times that the Avot are mentioned in the Torah, whether it's the amount of times that are mentioned in the building of the Mikdash, which is also an opinion mentioned in the Yerushalmi, right? Or the amount of times that God's name is mentioned in a certain parak of Tehillim. All of these numbers, 18, they all coalesce into one idea, maintaining the structure of 18. Zo, 18, which is why, right, one of the most features of Nusach Eretz Yisrael, again, before we get into the specificities of the content, one of the most striking features is that the structure of 18 remains all the time. There's no deviating from that structure of 18, which is, right, that manifests in the fact that the bracha called et semach, which is right, talking about Malchut Beit David, and the bracha of Yerushalayim are combined into one. That's how it expresses itself today, right? And we'll get to that just in a moment. So again, that was the first topic I wanted to highlight, and it's important to understand this because this actually shows us that the structure of the Amidah is important, also the halakha. Right? Why is that? If you can open up in Yamin, if you can open up the wiki source link for Brachot Lamed. You see a wiki source for Brachot Lamed? Yeah, there you go. Wonderful. So we're just gonna. It's in the very first section of Brachot Lamed. So as we know, there's a blessing. There's a condensed version of tefillah, which is known as Havinenu, right? The Havinenu structure is for a person who's in a certain situation where he's unable to pray the whole Amidah, and he needs to, do a condensed version of Shemona Esrei. Okay, so a person is allowed to do this. Now, there's the kitzur, and then there's the mekutzrar. Okay, there's the abridged, and then there's the really abridged. Okay, and that's called tefillah ktsara. Okay, so Chazal ask Inu and the tefillah ktsara. Okay, last two lines of the top paragraph over here. So the Gemara answers the following: Havinenu ba'il tzaluye gimel kamaita v'gimel batraita. And the Havinenu, how is it phrased? The first three blessings, the last things, and it includes in the middle a summary of all the intermediary blessings. Okay, that's the structure of Havinenu. And when he arrives home, meaning when he gets to a safe place where he is able to say where he is in theory able to say the entire Shemona Esrei, like the unabridged version. Okay, lo bai lemehadar litzaluye. He does not need to go back and pray. Meaning the Havinenu, he's fulfilled his obligation to pray. Like there's no need to go back and pray again. But tefillah ktsara, in contrast to the super abridged version known as tefillah ktsara, lo ba'il tzaluye lo gimel kamaita v'lo gimel batraita. He does not need to pray the first three blessings or the last three blessings. It's all one tefillah, super condensed tefillah ta'amidah. V'chimata leveitei, and when he does arrive home, again, home being a place where he is able to pray without rushing and he's able to be in a focused state of mind, right? He does in fact need to pray again, right? So what are we seeing from this Gemara, right? What we're seeing here is that there is a minimum structure to the Amidah that if you deviate from that structure, okay, there's no, right, the person hasn't really prayed Shemona Esrei, right? It's like, this is better than nothing, right? That's the level of b'diavad, this or nothing. So if it's the options are this or nothing, then, but really you haven't even fulfilled your obligation, okay? In the halakha l'maaseh, in addition to what we've just seen now, right? The tefillah of Havinenu, it's not so practical nowadays because very often a person doesn't find themselves in a situation where they are able to pray, right? But the 2 minutes of difference between Havinenu and the full Shemona Esrei are actually going to be, the deal breaker, right? It's not so practical. Open up in Yemen the Chayei Adam from Sefaria. It's the second Sefaria link. I think there's yeah. Yeah, here we go. So Klal Chaf Daled of the Chayei Adam.
It's loading.
Yeah. There seems to be some issue. And say, okay, fine. Well, we'll just say while it's loading. The idea of the Chayei Adam is the following. He says, Nira li. He says, it appears to me the most logical thing to do. Okay, that if a person finds himself in the beginning of Shmona Esrei, meaning in the first three brachot, okay, the first three brachot, then and he realizes that he doesn't remember where he is. Like he forgets his place. He's for sure in the beginning of Shemona Esrei, but he forgets if he's in Avot or the second bracha of Mechayeh or in Kadosh. Okay, if he forgets where he is, he needs to start from the beginning. Okay, and the same thing says the Chayei Adam. The same thing when a person finds himself in the last three brachot. If he knows that he's in the end of Shemona Esrei, and he's either in the bracha of Avodah, or the bracha of Modim, or the bracha of Shalom, right? He knows that he's in one of those three blocks. He needs to go back to the beginning of the bracha of Ritzei. Okay, why is that? Says the Chayei Adam, because these units, right, the beginning three brachot and the end three brachot, they are the bookends that are kavua. They are permanent features of the Shemona Esrei, and you can't deviate from them, right? They are their own units. Okay. So therefore, if a person doesn't know, right, where he happens to be, he always has to go to the if you're looking for the spot, by the way, Binyamin, it's in Klal Chaf Aleph, like on the right hand margin, it has little letters, and it says which klal it is. And conversely, if a person is in the middle of Shemona Esrei, if he's in one of the in the intermediary blessings, the 12 rather intermediary blessings, so all he has to do is go back to the last blessing that he remembers wherever he was, right? Meaning the intermediary blessing, kiv, so to speak. They don't the halachic of the blessings, because again, the middle blessings are flexible, right? The middle blessings are flexible. The first three blessings and the last three blessings, they are the standard features of the middle is flexible, right? We can work with that. We can so to speak, we can make changes according to what we need to do, which is again the whole point of the first makor that we saw from the are changes necessary to put this theme into that blessing and to move around that topic into a different bracha. We're able to do that. Are the first three blessings and the last three blessings. So this idea of the structure of the Amidah, that you have three in the beginning, three at the end, and they all together have to add up to 18, okay? And the middle blessings are the ones that are flexible, and the first three and the last three are not flexible. This is the fundamental structure of the Amidah, and this has all types of nafkaminot lemaaseh, more important and more common nafkaminot, that if a person where he forgets where he happens to be holding a Shemona Esrei, right? In fact, it's funny. He starts off the section with like someone who falls asleep, mitnamnem b'tfilato. Someone's dozing off in the middle of his tefillah, and he forgets where he is. Right. This is important nafkamina. But again, all this is just highlighting the structure. And now I would like to delve in to get started with the actual text, of the brachot. You can go back to the Google Doc, Binyamin. Yeah, there you go. Okay, great. So I want to highlight. Now, I said that there were differences in ideology. That's the title of the shoot. However, I don't want people to think that I was implying that every single aspect of the Nusach Eretz Yisrael is presenting some stark contrast to the Nusach of Bavel, right, and vice versa. I'm not trying to imply that. I think that certain differences, even though they're linguistic differences, right, a clear difference in the Nusach, it doesn't represent any deep philosophical distinction, right? And I think that actually most of the blessings in the Tefillah are like that, right? As we saw, everyone understands, even the Chachmei Bavel, right? The Chachmei Bavel and Chachmei Eretz Yisrael both agree that there is a structure, right? A general structure to the brachot, and that's themes. There's 18 themes, okay? But theme is not the same thing as subject, right? Subject is a lot more specific. Theme is very general, right? If you ask, okay, what's the theme? Okay, so the theme is X. But what is the blessing about? That's a different question. It's a very different question, as we'll see in a moment, right? So again, I think that the majority of the blessings are in fact not represented, right? The majority of the differences between Nusach Eretz Yisrael and Nusach Bavel are not really communicating any major difference. However, there are some differences that are very striking and worth highlighting. Very, very striking, okay? So first we'll start off with the first blessing, right? First blessing, it's a good place to start, right? So the bracha of Avot, okay? So if we analyze the blessing over here, again, the theme of the blessing is clearly the Avot, right? Okay, the Avot and something about Magen Avraham, okay, the fact that God shields Abraham. But if we're going to ask what is the blessing about, that's a very different question, okay? Truth is, I'm realizing now that it would have been a lot more helpful if I had Nusach Bavel put the side to side over here, but I trust that everyone is at least generally familiar with the Nusach of Bavel to be able to appreciate the differences. In the Nusach of Bavel, in the first blessing, one can make the argument, I don't know if you need to even make the argument, I think it's just very, very clear, that the theme of the first blessing is very much talking about the redemption of the Jewish people, right? The blessing is ended off with the famous four terminologies, Melech, Ozer, Umushia, Umagen, that God is the savior, right? Early on in the blessing it says, Umevi Goel Livnei V'nehem, that God will bring a salvation to the descendants of these avot because of the covenant that he made with them, right? It's very clear that in the Nusach of Bavel, the topic is Geulah, meaning that God started off this project with Abraham, and the end goal is to bring Geulah Livnei V'nehem, to bring some type of final. That is clearly what the bracha is about, okay? However, in the Nusach of Eretz Yisrael, we don't see anything about Geulah per se, right? There's nothing about Geulah, like the final climax of Jewish history, okay? We say, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor VaHanora El Elyon Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz. He is our shield, and Magen Abutenu, and the shield of our forefathers, Miftachenu B'chol Dor Vador. And we are able to rely upon him in every generation, okay? Nice, short and sweet, right? No mention of Geulah. The theme that's being highlighted in the bracha of Nusach Eretz Yisrael, in contrast to Bavel, is that this blessing is about the perpetual hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Jewish people throughout the generations, right? It's not talking about Geulah per se. Obviously, this program that God started with Abraham, with the Mot HaMashiach, and the full redemption of the Jewish people, the full let's say, the liberation of the Jewish people. But the topic of the blessing itself is not talking about that. The topic is the fact that God is mashgiach. He has hashgacha over the Jewish people constantly and perpetually, right? If we can look at the, if you could pull up, if you could pull up the makor from Machon Mamre in Sefer Bereshit in Perek Vav. There you go. So at least the language of Nusach Eretz Yisrael is taken directly from the Psukim. Oh, excuse me, that's Yeshayahu. You could leave that open for now, but it's the other Machon Mamre link. There's two Machon Mamre links there. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So basically, the context is the context of these psukim in Bereshit Perek Vav is that Abraham fights this massive regional war against the coalition of 4 kings from the east that are coming to quell a rebellion against him. A rebellion, which, by the way, this is a really fascinating topic, and Bezrat Hashem, I really hope to do a shiur on this. The this rebellion is in fact triggered to a large extent by Avram Avinu's movement. So Avram is really inextricably connected to the whole regional conflict over here. That's important to know, and it's actually important for our conversation right now, but really is a subject for another time. So Avram fights this major regional war. He saves his nephew from captivity and saves the residents of Sodom. Okay, and he has this interaction, right? He has this interaction with this priest-like figure, Melchizedek. Okay, and Melchizedek comes to greet him, and he says to Avram, right, Baruch Avram le'el elyon koneh shamayim va'aretz, the God on high who has acquired or has control over heavens and earth, right? So that's like, already it's right there, black and white, right? Koneh shamayim va'aretz. Okay, and continuing, right, in the beginning of Perek Tedvav, okay, achar advarim ha'eleh hayad dvar Hashem el Avram b'machazeh lemor al tira Avram anochi magen lach scharcha harbe meod. So we see the and the very end of the blessing, okay, the Koneh shamayim va'aretz and the Magen Avraham theme, right, coming one after another. And these chapter breaks, as we all know, as I'm sure, I wouldn't say they're completely arbitrary, but they're certainly not part of our Masorah. Chapter breaks have any indication for us in terms of the thematical progression of the Torah. Okay, what is this declaration that God is the Magen Avraham? This is a covenant between the parts, as it is, right, poetically known. Okay, what is the nature of this covenant between the parts? So as we know, and as Rav Gabriel gave a beautiful shir on the Haggadah, right, the Brit Ben Abtarim is the central theme of the Haggadah. And the whole point, the central point of what the Haggadah is trying to tell you is that this Brit Ben Abitarim was not a one-time event. Don't think that the content of the Brit Ben Abitarim was a one-time event. Rather, it is talking about all of Jewish history, the full expanse of Jewish history. What is the content of the Brit Ben Abitarim? Your children will be enslaved by some foreign nation. Doesn't say which foreign nation, right? They'll be enslaved by some foreign nation. They'll be brutally oppressed, but I'm going to save them. That's the Brit Ben Abitarim. Okay, and the whole chidush of the Haggadah, which really emerges from the pshat of the psukim, but it could be easily overlooked. The whole point of the Haggadah is to tell us that this covenant is not a one-time thing. It's not saying that this is going to happen once in Jewish history, that one time the descendants of Avram are going to be enslaved and then God is going to save them, okay, and then that's going to be it, right? It's like a one-time show. No, don't think that, but rather understand that the Brit Ben Abitarim is forever. Forever. So when it says Magen Avraham, I'm going to guard you, and this is going to be the dynamic of how I guard you. I'm going to apply the terms of the Brit Ben Abitarim. This is going to be forever, and that's what the Nusach Eretz Yisrael is trying to say. Miftachenu b'chol dor vador. We are miftach. We rely on you and every generation, and Kadosh Baruch Hu of what we call the Brit Ben Abitarim, that God will guard the Jewish people throughout the generations. He ensures the continuity of the Jewish people. Okay, so again, this is the theme. So whereas in the Nusach of Bavel, it does obviously talk. It does make references to this fact that God guards the avot, but it has a very strong emphasis on the Geulah factor. Okay, the Geulah factor, the zenith of Jewish history. Whereas in Nusach Eretz Yisrael, the theme is very, very much clearly focusing on this Brit, the Brit Ben Abitarim, of the constant guarding of okay, that's blessing number one. Where are we holding on time? 9:27. Okay, so we'll start moving. If we can go back to the original Google Doc where the brachot are. Yeah, there you go. Wonderful. Okay, so second blessing. The second blessing is also very important. This is like, I mean, it's just so, I mean, the differences are almost like stereotypical, like the differences that they highlight between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael, right? Like you could have, you could have guessed this, I guess, but it's just important to highlight. It's interesting how I read a fascinating article that in the Genizah of Kahir, when they discovered manuscripts of Nusach Eretz Yisrael, so in the manuscripts the second blessing wasn't called Gvurot, which it's typically called in the Sidurim that we have today. It wasn't called the bracha of Gvurot, it was called the bracha of Mechayeh, right? give life. The second blessing is the bracha of Mechayel Ata Gibor, right? You are the strong one, the mighty one, okay? Mashpil Geim, Chazak Medina Ritzim, that God, right, he has strong, this strength that he's able to mete out justice. Chei Olamim, he is eternal, okay? Mekim, Mashiva Ruach, and God brings the dude. Okay. Now, how many times is Mechaye Metim mentioned in this blessing? Now, this is kind of a trick question because it really depends on which version of Nusach Eretz Yisrael you have in terms of how many times it's mentioned. But the point is that it's not mentioned nearly as many times in the Nusach of Bavel. Okay, and what's also important to highlight is that it's not at the chatima of the blessing. It's not at the end of the blessing. Whereas in Nusach Bavel, right, the blessing ends off with the ne'eman atala achayot, to bring about the revivification of the dead, which is, right, as we know, one of the principles of the Rambam, that a person, right, believes that this is going to be one of the features of the end of days, that God will in fact revivify the dead. Okay. So there is clearly a lack of emphasis on this advent of Mechaye Metim. It's there for sure. However, the Mechaye Metim is possibly subsidiary and at the most equal to the theme of Geshem. And I want to suggest the following. Okay, really, this blessing in Nusach Eretz Yisrael, this blessing is in fact focusing on the rain. That's the topic of the blessing, the rain. Okay, there is a hashva'ah, there is a comparison to the Tchiyat HaMetim element, because the rain is our experience of the revivification of the dead in this corporal material world. So it fits in of the revivifying the dead in the context of rain. That's what's going on, meaning the main theme of this blessing is the rain, and the blessing is also telling you that you can get a glimpse in instant to experience the rain. And this is alluded to very, very clearly, Dafka in the Talmud Bavli, from one of the Chachmei Eretz Yisrael in Masechet Ta'anit. This is also wiki text, Binyamin, in Ta'anit Daf Zayin, in the very, very beginning of Amud Aleph. Yeah, I think it's that one. Oh no, that's Megillah. You could also leave that open, but it's the other wiki text one. Wiki source, maybe, yeah. There you go. Okay, it's literally the first line. I'm Rabbi Abau, and this is one of the Chachmei Eretz Yisrael. Yorbau Gadol Yom HaGeshamim. Day of rain is even better than the revivifying of the dead. It's even right. The advent of Tchiyat HaMetim is only for the righteous, only for people who merit it. Right? The Geshamim, who don't deserve it, right? That's a very big theme in Chazal, that Geshamim come into the world and they have this blanket effect, right? For some people, they experience it one way, some people experience excuse me, some people experience it another way, but it's this all-encompassing, gets hit by the rain in the same way. Yeah. So this is the idea. The idea of Rabbi Abau is that really the Geshamim is greater than Tchiyat HaMetim in this manner. Okay, and if you want to what this miraculous event that we're all waiting for of Tchiyat HaMetim, if you want to get a glimpse into what that is, just go outside and experience the rain. That's all you need to do. And because the population in Eretz Yisrael in a very, very different way, because Eretz Yisrael, as we are told already in Parshat Ekev, right? This land that you're going to come to, the only way that you're going to get any water is if I make it rain. That's the only way. The other places that you happen to go to where you have natural water sources, that you don't have to look to heaven for your sustenance. Okay, Eretz Yisrael it's completely dependent on rain. Okay, so if you want to, so the people of Eretz Yisrael, they really experienced this reviving of the dead whenever it rained. Okay, so the main theme of the blessing is, and it was a consequence of that this recalled the theme of Tchiat HaMetim, of the reviving of the dead, was their experience. It was literally reviving the dead when it rained. Yeah, and it's interesting to note that the Talmud continues, Upliga de Rav Yosef, one of the Chachmei Bavel, Rav Yosef, mitoch shahaya shekula Tchiat HaMetim, because it is akin to Tchiat HaMetim, because Geshamim is similar to Tchiat HaMetim. That's why they stuck Geshamim in Tchiat HaMetim. So you see, for Rav Yosef, it's the opposite. Really, the blessing is about Tchiat HaMetim, but they stuck in the theme of Geshamim because they're similar, right? It's literally the opposite. According to Rabbi Abau, no, the Geshamim is greater than Tchiat HaMetim. So we're going to mention Tchiat HaMetim while we're talking about Geshamim. And Rabbi Yosef says the exact opposite. While we're talking about Tchiat HaMetim, which is the main topic of the conversation, we're going to also stick in Geshamim. Okay? So wanted to highlight this as well. And for us, obviously living in Eretz Yisrael, where we live, Kinneret is going down, it hasn't rained, there's a drought here, a drought there, right? Like this is your consciousness, whether you like it or not, right? So for us, right, who have merited to return to Eretz Yisrael and experience this, from that this blessing is talking about rain. And the theme is the existential experience of the rain in Eretz Yisrael, but it's not the main topic of the conversation. Tov. So we can go back to the Nusach of Tefillah. It's good that we're actually making good progress here. You can go back. Yeah, good, great. So we're actually going to skip ahead now, because as I said, I don't believe that every single blessing over here, or every difference of blessing, is indicative of a major ideological difference, right? Like in the bracha of refuah, for example, for healing. So healing is healing. There are sick people in Bavel. There are sick people in Eretz Yisrael. There's no shortage of sick people, unfortunately, and we all need healing. So like the healing is healing, right? I don't think there's a major difference between the bracha of refuah in Bavel and the bracha of refuah in Eretz Yisrael, even though there are linguistic differences. But thematically or ideologically, I don't think there's a major difference. The next blessing that I think does, in fact, highlight a major difference is the bracha of Shoftim, right? Hashiva Shoftenu Kvar Rishona. Okay, when we get to this blessing, okay, the devil is in the details, and here the devil is in the. Okay, this blessing is relatively short. We ask that God bring back the Shoftim and the Yoatzim, the advisors and the judges, as they were before, and that God should reign over us. Now, in the classic Nuschaot of Bavel, both of these things are there, right? Both of these things, the Shoftim and the Yoatzim, and that we want God to rule over us, that's there as well, okay? But what is included are these concepts, right, of justice and righteousness and charity that are meant to be brought into the world as an effect of this, okay? Now, just in order to highlight this difference, I want to share with you a fascinating makor. This is the other Safaria link, Benjamin. This is the riff from Masechet Brachot. So if you just open up the other Safaria link, it should be right there. Yeah, there you go. Great. So this is the riff. This is the riff on Masechet Brachot. Okay. This is actually talking about the abridged tefillah that we mentioned before. Okay, the tefillah of Havinenu. Okay. Hold on one moment. Yeah. So this is Rabbi Yoshua, and he's introducing to us. He's introducing to us the language of Havinenu. Again, the Havinenu is the condensation of the 12 middle blessings into one long run-on paragraph. Okay. Now, if we look at the language of Havinenu carefully, we can identify each one of the 12 themes of the intermediary. Brachot. Okay. So when we see okay, that you should ingather those who have been spread out in the diaspora from the four corners of the earth. Okay, now here's the line about Vahatast in your dot. Okay, those who are lost in your dot. Okay, Yishpotu, you should judge who are lost in your dot. What does that mean? Those who are lost in your dot. So you could translate as a those who are wayward. B'datcha, in your will, in the godly divine way. Okay, yishpot the wicked, something like that, right? That's I think on the surface level how many people interpret it. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's how Rashi interprets it, although don't quote me on that. I actually forget what Rashi says on this particular line. But be that as it may, we have over here the Rabbeinu Yonah, or the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah, what his students collected of his comments on the Rif, which is in the column to the left. You can see in the same page, right? Safaria is great. Misudar fashion on the same page. So he. What does this mean that there are these people that are wayward, right? Vahatoim, okay? Those who are wayward in your dot. What does that even mean? So it says Rabbeinu Yonah, Vahatoim Yisrael. These are the Jewish people, the whole Jewish people, the entire nation of Israel. These are the wayward people. Hametichim dvarim, right? B'zeh galut. They are crying out to heaven in criticism. They are criticizing heaven in their state of exile. Sha'azava kadosh baruch hu otam them, ve'eino mashgiach bam, and is not yehi ratzon sheishpotu, be your will that you should judge them. What does that mean? Klomar bidiatcha, with your knowledge of them. Asher hi hachemla, which is the divine mercy. V'hachanina milashon v'yada Elohim. For all the Tanakh pasuk from v'yada Elohim, that is from Yetziat Mitzrayim, where it says that the Jewish people v'yanchu min ha'avodah, that they moaned from the backbreaking, psychologically tormenting work that they were undergoing in Egypt, and they screamed out to God. And it says vayada Elohim, and God knew. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, what does that mean that God knew? Of course God knew. No, vayada Elohim, God knows. When it says that God knows you, it means his chemla, divine mercy. That's vayada. And this is the condensed version of this blessing, right, of the shoftim, the yoatzim, hatoim b'datcha yishpotu. That those who have this justice in the world, that there is no fairness, let din v'let dayan, as Chazal say, there's no justice and there's no judge, okay? You should show them that there is justice. There is someone running the show. There is someone who cares about what's right and what's wrong and what's fair and what's not. You should show them, yishpotu, right? What is the inspiration for the language of this blessing? Okay, you can open up the other, if you can open up the other Mamre link. Oh, did you close it? Yeah, I think you closed it. Yep, here we go. Okay, great, wonderful. So it's in the last, in the last section of Yeshayahu, Perek Aleph. So this in Pasuk Chaf Bet. Okay, you can follow along. Kasbei chayal sigim, your silver is filled with all types of impurities. Okay, Mashal. This is a parable, which the Navi explains what his own parable is. That your silver has all these impurities in it. What's the parable? So Pasuk Chaf Gimel. Sarayich sorerim. Okay, your officers are completely wayward. The chaverei ganavim. Okay, and your friends, or right, the people, right, it's referring to the officials, they're all thieves. Kulo ohev shochad, they all love to be bribed. Okay, so that's the silver that is full of impurities, meaning the silver is supposed to be, right, like the cream of the crop of society, the people that are exceptional, they're supposed to be the ones running the show. I'll just allow myself a small tangent, a small parenthetical. In Hilchot Dayanim, right, in Hilchot Sanhedrin, rather, excuse me, he talks about how the different Dayanim are appointed, and he makes very clear that the way Dayanim are appointed is that the Sanhedrin Agadol sends messengers out throughout all of Israel to scout out potential people. Meaning, you couldn't apply to be a Dayan, right? Like you couldn't apply to be one of these officials. You had to be spotted. You had to be spotted. And then they approached them and they said, listen, would you like to fill this position? We see that you're appropriate for this role, right? But today, obviously, for positions of power, people either apply or they try to grab it with force. It's a separate conversation. But just to highlight that difference, okay? So this is what the Navi is saying. Like this echelon of society has become completely corrupt. Pasuk Chafei, Va'ashiv yadi alayich. I will put my hand on you, ve'etzrof, and I will cleanse with fire all of these impurities. Okay, Pasuk Chavav, Va'ashiv shoftayich kavarishona, v'yoatzayich kavatchila, and I will return your judges and your advisors to how they were before, which is this blessing. This is our blessing. So Rabotai, what is the theme of this blessing? This isn't a blessing about about charity and justice. Like it is obviously like a consequence of all this should be the charity and the justice and the kindness and all of that. Yeah, but the focus, the primary focus of this blessing is one thing and one thing only: about corrupt and totalitarian rulership. That is the topic of the blessing. We see explicitly, this is what the prophet is talking about: corrupt leadership that is full of impurities. And God needs to come, and with his hand, he needs to burn away these impurities. And that's what's going to bring back the shoftim and the yoatzim to how they originally were. So when we pray to God, right, bring back our shoftim kvarishona, v'yoatzayich kvatchila, this is a prayer to get rid of this totalitarian repressive rule that we experience. And that's what Rabbeinu Yonah is trying to tell us, that the condensed version of the Shemona Esrei is also alluding to this. It's going back, it's harkening back all the way to the first servitude of the Jewish people in Egypt, when they were experiencing the poster child of the totalitarian kings, Paro of Egypt. He is the picturesque totalitarian, okay? And it's harkening back to that episode. Just like we cried out to you to be taken out of that subjugation, so too in every generation we should merit to correct our ruling class, right, and to be able to have a more perfected expression of what leaders are supposed to be. So this, I think, is also a very, very important highlighted, and again, it's highlighted by omission. Okay. So there are a few more things that I wanted to. I think that I'll suffice with just one more theme, because we've already gone a little bit over time. And again, I asked for all the technical difficulties. But we're just going to end off with this one last thing. There's not too much that we can get to. Was the third to last blessing, the bracha of Avodah. The bracha of Avodah. Go back to the Google Doc with the blessings. Yeah, there you go. So we'll go all the way down to Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu. Yeah, there you go. So you can see I wrote down Mul Shechina, right? That the Avodah and Contrina in the Babylonian version. Okay, it does mention the Avodah, the sacrificial service, and that that you should bring back the work to the Devir, right, to the Kodesh HaKodashim, right, not just the outer, more periphery forms of work like the Korbanot, but also the Devir, right, to the epicenter of the Mikdash itself, right. So it does mention that. However, right, the topic of the blessing, or the subject of the blessing, is very, very clearly not the Avodah per se, but it's talking about something a little bit more ethereal, right? Okay, we want the fire offerings of the Jewish people to be accepted willingly with Ratzon, right? Okay, but it's the Shekhinah that we're talking about. We're praying for the Shekhinah, okay? Hamachazir Shechinato L'Tzion, the blessing even says, God, return your divine presence to Zion. Return your divine presence to Zion. Now, obviously, we all want the divine presence to come back to Zion. That's something that we all want, and that's right. It's good. However, it's not the topic of the blessing, right? Not all things that are good have to be spoken about all the time, right? It's important to be focused, right? When Chazal say this is the topic of the blessing, then okay, so focus on this topic. The topic is the Avodah. The topic is the Avodah, and it's very, very clear. We want V'yavducha avadecha b'Yerushalayim. That is what we want. That is what we're interested in. Right? Of course, we want the Shechina. Machazir Shechina Filitzia. That for sure. Like, who doesn't want that? But this is not what we're focusing on. And it's very important. It's easily we're able to problem. I think that if you remember the conversation from 10 minutes ago about the Geshamim and Tchiyat HaMetim, about how these topics kind of overlay on each other and which one is primary and which one is secondary, we see a theme, and then spiritualized components, they become primary, and the more material, concrete components, they become secondary. Okay, the topic of the Geshamim becomes secondary to Tchiyat HaMetim. Okay, whereas in the Nusach Eretz Yisrael, it's clearly the opposite. That the rain is primary and the revivifying of the dead is secondary. Here, there's no first and second. It's just very clear what the topic is. The topic is the Avodah. We want the topic that it's talking about. Yeah, and I think that's again the final theme that's highlighted. I see that actually took me very, very quickly. So I'm going to say Mamash B'Kitzur Nimratz. I'm going to go back. I'm going to skip back to the Bracha of Yerushalayim, because I think this is also worth highlighting really, really quickly. We already mentioned from the Yerushalmi that we're rearranging the order of the Shemona Esrei in order to fit themes that they felt necessary after Rabban Gamliel. So they put the Bracha of David into the blessing. And I think that this idea is actually very, very nogea to us in our time. We just went through Tisha B'Av, right? Which is a day of mourning, which is hyper focused on Yerushalayim, right? Very much focused on Yerushalayim. And in the Nuschaot of Bavel, for sure, the modern Nuschaot that refuse to change and augment themselves to the reality, which was, again, as we know, and there's no reason to be ma'arich in this idea, right? All of the Chachamim, the Dorei Dorot, were very adamant on this idea to augment our tefillot, not replace, God forbid, but to have some parallel to the reality, right? But the very fact that it's easily conflatable, right? The destruction of Jerusalem to all the other consequences, that's probably a better way of saying it, to all the other consequences of the destruction of Jerusalem. Meaning the destruction of Jerusalem, the physical destruction of Jerusalem, had several consequences. And the two biggest consequences of that were, first of all, the destruction of the temple, and the second, the ceasing of the line of the Davidic kingdom. Okay? So all of these things are put into one blessing. And this highlights how all of these things are really, in essence, the same problem. The fact that Yerushalayim physically destroyed, it brought about all these side effects, or it's not side effects, right? Each one is horrible in and of itself. The fact that Jerusalem was destroyed brought about the destruction of the temple and the fact that there's no malchut in the Jewish people. Okay? And these things are the same problem. Don't try to disconnect the fact that Jerusalem was destroyed, physically destroyed, from the fact that there's no more. It's the same. So when we talk about the rebuilding of Jerusalem, we're not just talking about the fact that there's a beautiful light rail and the fact that you can get good falafel on the corner. Like I'm the last one, just as much as the next guy, and I'm happy that I live in close proximity. Right, but I'm just saying that the physical reconstruction of Jerusalem, okay, is for us is inextricably bound with the bringing back of the temple and the bringing back of Malchut Beit David. It's the same topic, and in a way, there is a lacking in the building. All the time that we do not experience the return of these components, and that's why all of these are contained within one blessing, and indeed they are one blessing. And even though, again, I don't want to be too ma'arich, mamash, I'm gonna end now, I promise. But Chazal were very adamant on not mixing different topics into one blessing, to not make one blessing talk about multiple things. If you talk about one blessing, talk about one thing, right? But we see that it's not multiple. And the Beit HaMikdash and Yerushalayim is not talking about multiple topics. It's the same topic, the same thing. Yerushalayim means the Mikdash, and Malchut Beit David, and the physical rebuilding of Jerusalem. So Be'ezrat Hashem, this is what I wanted to share with everyone. I hope that it was received well. I hope that it was relatively clear. If we have time for a few questions, I'm happy to take them.
I do not have any question that I wish to ask. I just want to say that the show
Okay.
was very, very illuminating and well delivered. Hazak u'baruch, Shem yishmor otcha.
Tov Yishar Koach for the whole tzibor, and hope to see you all again very soon.
So thank you very much, Rabbi Siskind.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.